Hello, this is Professor Bagnera, and today we are going to examine the remaining part of Chapter 1, the Traditional Hotel Industry for Rooms Division Management. First area we're going to look at today is seasonality. There are three aspects within seasonality. The first is that it can occur within the year, where the business will actually fluctuate in volume from winter to spring to summer to fall. In New England, you would have to imagine that the winter time period for us, the second half of November through to probably March, is going to be considered a slow season, winter, and it's not going to be busy. There are occasions where within the month it's going to fluctuate from the early part to the later part. An example of this would be in November in New England, especially on the North Shore area, in which the first 2 weeks in November still remain busy, as there's still some overflow business and excitement left over from Halloween, especially up in the Salem area. And as that weather starts to change and as Thanksgiving comes into play, those last 2 weeks of the month really drop off. And then finally, within the week, here you have a corporate hotel, which typically is found in a downtown area, and they're going to be very busy on the weekdays. However, on the weekends, they're typically going to be empty. One of the ways that Sage Hotel Management, who currently manages what is soon to be the DoubleTree in Danvers, formerly or currently right now listed as the Cocoa Key Hotel and Water Park Resort. Formerly that was the Crown Plaza, and prior to that, that was the Sheraton Ferncroft. So when they took that Sheraton and they added the water park, what they attempted to do at this location was keep the corporate business in this location during the week, and their intention was to really keep those weekends packed with the family and leisure side. However, this particular model did not really work with either the Sheraton or the Crown Plaza, as their flags were not remaining in status, and that's where they went to a non-flagged property, because the corporate clients really struggled with the leisure clients all around property. The other component is that leisure hotels can be busy on the weekends and empty on the weekdays. Again, that's why the Cocoa Key brand was looking to try and have a mix, because they didn't want to just have packed up weekends and then weekdays that are empty. Keep in mind, within hotels, regardless of the seasonality here, hotels never close. It's kind of a joking fact that we don't even have a key to the front door. It's kind of, there's a tradition that when you open a hotel, you throw away the key when the property opens. Typically, the only time I've ever seen a property actually close on the North Shore area has been in the Holiday Inn in Peabody, when they were closed because the EPA shut them down for several weeks. Or if you're in a area in which we have had a tornado, a damaging hurricane, earthquake, something along those lines that is destructive to the structure of your property. Other than that, you're just not going to close. So, some solutions to look at this seasonality. The first we look at is extend the season. If you can do this, this is where you can have new activities and sales promotions, both before as well as after what the traditional season is, so in order to extend it. Pardon me, that's one of the things that north of Boston has really tried to do in the Salem area. Not just focus on Halloween in Salem, but try and see how can they keep it engaged in that particular area for a little bit longer to keep the market going. You can try and seek new markets. Disney gets families in the summer and in the winter holiday and targets conventions or the empty nesters. Empty nesters are typically couples after their children have left, maybe gone to college, or maybe senior citizens. Their nest is now empty, they have no kids at home. So that's a good opportunity to try and get those folks year round. On the location side, Open properties and areas with a counter season, where you have properties that are under the same ownership or management group, and then you can take those employees and shift them from one location to another, so that they're still having the opportunity to maintain employment, or at least maintain hours. And then finally, some type of mixed use development. Here is having a hotel built in an area where you have multiple sources of guests. So for example, down in Dallas, Texas, the Westin Galleria gets the corporate crowd on the weekdays, and yet on the weekends we'll get the tourist shopper crowds on the weekends. Again, if you try and connect with mixed use, you'll have different types of clientele, and hopefully you'll be able to maintain reducing that fluctuation in your seasonality. All right, the next thing we need to wrap our head around is the different sizes of hotels. And the number of available rooms is what we use as the standard measure of size for a hotel. So the first type of hotel that we look at is a mega hotel. This is going to have 1,500 rooms or more. These are really large hotels. When you work in a mega hotel, there are a lot more managers, and so the managers seemingly end up doing less work in each department because they are overseeing more so than you would find in a small hotel where those managers are really hands-on in a position. The large hotels are going to be 300 rooms or more. Again, you're going to have a decent level of management there in those properties. When you hit medium hotels at 150 to 300 rooms, your management role is going to start to become more hands-on. And there may be an expectation that as a manager you take part in actually working shifts within your department. Don't be surprised in that. On the small hotel, this is where you've got less than 100 rooms. You're typically making less than $3 million in annual sales. And ironically here, you are also going to be paid less for working in these properties. However, what's ironic is that you will be working more than you would be if you worked at a mega property in many instances, because in a small property, if one of your staff members does not show up, you're filling that role as the manager. If you don't have a replacement person, if someone is either terminated or resigns, you're working on that position. However, in terms of a learning culture, you will learn so much more in a small hotel because you will have to be somewhat cross-trained between departments and learn what everybody is doing. And then finally, on that mom and pop, these are going to be those small independent roadside motels that you may see. They're family owned and operated. Motel actually came from a combination of two words coming from both motor and hotel, motel. And this was a phrase that was coined after World War II because folks were traveling via highway and then they wanted to be able to park in front of their hotel room door. This particular term was refined after Kemmons Wilson, who opened the first Holiday Inn on August 1st, 1952. He actually redefined that term more so to hotel. These are declining in terms of those small mom and pop places. There are not nearly as many, and more customers are more apt to stay at a branded property. Keep in mind that the role of a hotel is to provide basic accommodations. Those basic accommodations include shelter, food, and hospitality. Alternative terms that you may see for a hotel could be considered a hostel, a tavern, a public house, in-guest house, hotel, resort, motel, as we just talked about, a motor lodge, a motor inn, a bed and breakfast, and a condo. So be mindful that hotel is not the only word. There can be multiple terms that can be used to classify hotels. Now let's take a look at class as another way to define hotels. And one of those ways is to do so by rate. Typically, You may think at this stage that if you're going to pay more, you're going to have a better experience. So therefore, the more expensive the hotel, the better it is. However, that's really not always true. There are instances where a $200 expensive a room rate will get you a small or medium room in Paris, France. But there's also a Paris in the United States, and that's in Texas, and that's going to get you a great room with a lot of size because of the ability within Texas. They have a lot more space than they do in a downtown city like Paris, France. Keep in mind that the room rate may be a function of the location and the real estate value itself more so than the room. And rooms typically are going to be more expensive in downtown areas. All right, another way to continue to define our hotels is by the level of service that is offered. Typically, the more services, the better. Again, this is not always true. More services are offered where the labor costs are lower. Even small, cheap hotels in India offer room service and many other services like money changing services. Second here is going to be by amenity. Again, not always true. More amenities, the better the hotel. Just because you have a lot of amenities does not mean that you're doing them all well or in good method. And finally, the different rating systems. So we would like to say that there is a standard rating system to allow guests to make informed decisions. And there is some systems, and you're probably familiar with seeing those in terms of maybe stars or diamonds. Typically, you would see diamonds in a AAA rating, but not everybody has membership into AAA. They may take interest in it, but it's not that everybody has it. The World Tourism Organization, the WTO, looks at class of hotels as a way to rate properties. And they have 5 different ways. The first is going to be deluxe or luxury. Second are first class hotels. Third is tourist or economy hotels, which is considered second class hotels. Then there's third class and fourth class. One of the ways to put that into perspective, if you've ever watched the movie Titanic and where the first class passengers were, the second class passengers, and the third class. The third class passengers were the ones that were all the way in the bottom. And if you look at the statistics on Titanic, the third class passengers were the last to leave the ship, and therefore most of those folks died because they were not able to be released from the ship. Also keep in mind that the ratings are only valid within the system or the country. So a 5-star hotel in India is certainly not the same 5-star hotel as it is in France. You have to really look for the amenities and the level of service that's needed to qualify. There's a tremendous amount of research and study in terms of different rating systems, but typically on a rating system, the higher the number of stars or diamonds or whatever other shape, it typically means it's a better property, and it's also going to typically mean that it's going to be more expensive. All right, let's take a look at the different hotel classifications based on type. You do want to know all the types because you will see these again. So the first is going to be your commercial, business, or corporate. Typically this is a convention style hotel. Other terms for this could be transient hotels. They're also the largest category. They are looking for short-term business guests. Short-term meaning 1 to 4 days. They're considered to be the backbone of the industry. That's how we got started. And then their weekends are typically going to produce some form of weekend occupancy that's relatively poor. So they're certainly going to look at opportunities at how they can increase that occupancy. They're also going to be full service properties. Full service meaning they're going to have a variety of amenities. Okay, on the residential side, this is going to be a permanent occupancy You're going to be a resident. So this is going to change the relationship. Instead of being guest and innkeeper, this is going to be more of a landlord-tenant relationship. It also will make it more of a challenge if your guest fails to make payments, because you cannot simply lock the guest out of the room with the key and refuse them access into the room. You actually have to go into eviction proceedings. On the extended stay side, this is going to be a hotel accommodation that's much more home-like. It's going to have either a kitchenette or a full kitchen, potentially a fireplace, which may or may not be in the guest room. Most of the time the fireplace will be in the lobby area. It'll also provide laundry facilities. Examples of this would be Extended Stay America, or Residence Inn by Marriott, or one of the properties I worked at, which was the Staybird Suites, which is a property by Intercontinental Hotels Group, which is actually probably one of my most favorite properties to have worked at. And we actually had full kitchens as opposed to kitchenettes because we had all of our rooms with ovens. Or typically the Residence Inn and their platform will only have 2 to 5 rooms with an oven. Hot commodity over Thanksgiving if you've got folks that are staying there. Again, the potential for long-term stay on an extended stay, we're looking for tiered stays, meaning the least desired here is 1 to 7 days. We typically want to get more than 7-day stay, so that second tier is going to be 7 to 14, then 15 to 30, or 30 plus. A guest staying more than 30 days in the state of Massachusetts becomes tax exempt, which is a nice feature and benefit in order to sell the property. The other factor again is after they've been with you for 30 days, that relationship also changes. So again, if a guest fails to pay, you can't lock them out after that 30 days. You actually have to go through the eviction process again. All right, next is going to be the resort category. Typically, these are going to traditionally cater to social and leisure guests. Your mega resorts are going to be very large properties. Think of mega, grand, and they're going to be self-contained. They are going to have multiple entertainment and recreation facilities, and essentially here the guests do not need to leave the property during their entire stay. So they can get to that resort and everything that they need in terms of activity, entertainment, food, lodging accommodations, everything is there, not necessarily under one specific roof, but think of the Disney area resorts. Essentially, again, you do not need to leave. Foxwoods is another good example locally. You can go there and stay for the entire weekend, and you do not need to leave. All right, next kind is bed and breakfast. Here, in many instances, this is going to be a room in a house, and you're going to end up having a bed in a house. One of the challenges on a bed and breakfast is that there's lack of privacy. You're going to most likely have breakfast with others, and in some instance, you may actually be having some form of a shared bathroom. On the boutique hotels, these are considered hip, chic, cool. Typically, the affluent age group is going to be going after these properties. These guests are going to be willing to pay 10 to 15% more for their rate because of the design concept. Therefore, they're going to have an increased ADR. They're going to have more revenue than a commercial property because, again, they're hip and trendy. In many instances, they will be small, and they are going to be individual properties that are going to offer some type of personal service. Good urban locations is what they're looking for. They're very popular in London, San Francisco, and in New York City. So some brands that offer boutique properties now, Starwood has the W Hotel, which stands for, or what they're trying to go after as being warm, welcoming, and witty. Very interesting in terms of a brand. Mediterranean Hotels is very art and techno. The Marriott brand is got now a new collection called the Autograph Collection. IHG, Intercontinental Hotels Group, has the Indigo. And Kimpton Hotels as an entire brand is just in general boutique hotels. Every single one is different. So again, on their soft attributes, they're very fashionable in terms of a location. And finally, your trophy hotels. These are going to be what we consider to be your big name hotels that are often bought for some type of prestigious purpose rather than for profit. So one of those, in terms of a historical lineage that you can find, is the Waldorf Astoria in New York City. You can also consider in Denver, Colorado, the Denver Brown Palace. And moving on to breaking out the plan for hotel classifications. There's a lot of crossover that can occur between these different types. So the first is going to be the European plan. This is where you are only getting a room. You're paying for a room, and that's the only opportunity you have. It's just the room. The second is a continental plan, and this is considered getting a room and a light breakfast. A light breakfast is where the name ties in. Continental plan, you get a continental breakfast. Light breakfast meaning juice, rolls, tea, and coffee. And rolls could be, in our day now, rolls, croissants, maybe toast, English muffins, Danish, something along those lines. You don't necessarily need to heat it. It can grab and go. A lot of bed and breakfasts offer this. The American plan, AP, as it's commonly abbreviated as, is going to include your room, and it's going to include breakfast, which is B/F, lunch, as well as dinner. This is going to be kind of the full Monty. You get everything in the American plan. However, in the event that you do not return to the property to eat, let's say lunch, because you're out, you don't get a credit if you don't consume that meal. So if you're going to stay in a property that provides the American plan all 3 meals, ironically, more often than not, you'll find this over in European hotels, even though it's called the American plan. You might want to really consider what the rate category is that you're booking for. The next one is a modified American plan. Here, you're getting room and breakfast, and then you have a choice, either dinner or lunch. And this is one that kind of works out better because you make that decision in terms of what you're planning to do. You need to specify which one in advance in some instances, and then sometimes you have to use coupons for the meal that you get when you check in. So a lot of times lunch might not be the big one, but dinner is. But again, over in Europe, lunch is the bigger meal and dinner is not. A little different than what we do. So you always want to check with what you get in advance for your rooms. And so these terms mean different things to different people. So again, keep in mind that crossover of these different types is very common. So you really want to be looking at what you have available there. Again, here is a flash shot of the daily statistics for this particular chapter. You want to be familiar with these because you will be tested on them. And in final conclusion, you want to make sure that you understand the historical evolution of this industry, understand the size and scope of its products, the formulas you will need to calculate. There are 4: occupancy, ADR, RevPAR, and double occupancy. You also want to be familiar with how to classify your actual hotels, and we've started to use a lot of jargon and a lot of different terms, so you want to continue to maybe make some flashcards to keep yourself well prepared and on target. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.